Abraham, a journey of faith. Welcome to our story. A man called from history. Our story begins a long time ago, in an ancient land. It is a story about a man named Abram, whom we now know as Abraham. He is a central figure in the history of faith. His life is recorded in the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible. Abraham's story is not just an old tale. It is a foundational narrative for three of the world's major religions: Judaism, Christianity, Islam. He is often called the father of faith, a title he earned through a life of extraordinary trust and obedience. Understanding his journey helps us understand the very nature of believing in a promise that seems impossible to fulfill. We will explore his life and the path he took, guided by his true beliefs in God. Let's explore scripture on Abraham's faith in God. Imagine the dust of the desert, the heat of the sun, and the quiet of the night sky. We will walk alongside Abraham, feeling his uncertainty and his hope. It is a story filled with drama, difficult choices, and profound encounters with God. By seeing his life unfold, we can better grasp the challenges he faced and the incredible faith he demonstrated throughout his long journey. He was from a city called Ur of the Chaldees, a bustling metropolis in ancient Mesopotamia, what is now modern-day Iraq. People in his time worshipped many gods, often represented by idols made of wood and stone. Into this complex and polytheistic society, a call came to one man. It came from one God, a God who was unseen and who spoke directly to Abraham, promising to make him into a great nation. Faith, promise, testing, complexities of family, journey. And finally, it is a story of a journey, a physical and spiritual pilgrimage from what was known into a future that was promised but not yet seen. The journey of faith and promise. The story of Abraham is a journey, a physical move from a familiar home to an unknown destination. God called him, saying, "Go from your country, your people, your father's household, to the land I will show you." This was not a small request, leaving behind everything he knew: his culture, his relatives, the security of his homeland. The journey was long and difficult, across deserts, a physical journey that becomes a spiritual metaphor. We are invited to take this journey of faith in our own lives. We begin with his dramatic call in Ur. We travel as they pack their belongings and set out into the vast wilderness. We stand with him under a starry sky, promising descendants as numerous as the stars. We witness his moments of doubt and moments of incredible trust. We encounter raw, honest family struggles, the long wait for a child, tension between Sarah and Hagar, the birth of Ishmael, the birth of Isaac, Sarah's laughter of disbelief, Abraham's plea for a wicked city. Faith is often forged in trials and tribulations. Finally, the command to sacrifice his beloved son, Isaac. We walk with Abraham up the mountain, feeling the weight of his decision, feeling the depth of his trust. After the test, fulfillment of God's promises in his final years, the legacy he leaves behind. His story continues through generations, shaping the spiritual landscape of the world. One person's faith echoing through eternity. The voice in the city. Imagine the city of Ur. It was a place of great noise and activity, a center of commerce and culture in ancient Mesopotamia. Its towering ziggurat dominated the skyline, a massive temple dedicated to the moon god Nana. It was here that Abram lived, amidst the crowded streets, living a comfortable and predictable life. But something was about to disrupt this familiar world entirely. Into this ordinary life, an extraordinary voice spoke. It was not the voice of a stone idol. It was the voice of the one, true God, speaking directly to Abram. The words were clear and radical. "Go from your country, your people, your father's household, to the land I will show you." It asked him to sever ties with his past, his identity, and his security. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." For Abram, who was married to Sarai but had no children. This promise must have sounded impossible. The promise extended even further, stating that all peoples on earth would be blessed through him. He could remain in the comfort of Ur, or he could obey this unseen God and step out into a future that was completely unknown. The choice was not just about changing his location, it was about changing his entire allegiance. This moment of decision is the first great test of his faith, the hinge upon which his entire destiny and the destiny of nations would turn, leaving everything behind. The decision was made. Abram chose to obey. Imagine the conversations that must have taken place. He would have had to explain this radical plan to his wife, Sarai, his nephew, Lot. He would have had to tell his father, Terah, that he was leaving the family home. There must have been questions, doubts, perhaps even ridicule. The preparations for the journey would have been immense. Tents had to be gathered and checked, supplies packed, livestock organized for a long trek. We can picture the scene: servants loading donkeys, bundles of food, water skins, household goods. The clatter of pots and the bleating of sheep would have filled the air. Every strap that was tied, every animal that was herded, an expression of his trust in God's guidance. The Bible tells us Terah also set out with them from Ur, intending to go to Canaan, but they settled in Haran. After his father's death, Abram, now 75, received the command again and continued the journey. Finally, the day of departure arrived. Abram, Sarai, Lot. They led their flocks, their household out of the city gates, leaving behind the security of civilization. For the vulnerability of the open road, dust kicked up by their feet and their animals, was the dust of a new beginning. They were walking away from their past and into the promise of God, with nothing to guide them but a voice and a vision of a future they could not yet see. The long walk of faith. The journey from Haran to Canaan was long and filled with challenges. They would have traveled in a caravan, moving slowly with their flocks. Each day would have followed a similar rhythm: rising at dawn, packing up the camp, walking under the hot sun, and searching for pasture and water. There would have been moments of doubt and fear. What if they ran out of water? What if they were attacked by bandits? What if this promised land was a barren wasteland? The simple act of putting one foot in front of the other, day after day, became an act of worship. At 75 years old, with his wife Sarai past the age of childbearing, the idea of becoming a great nation seemed more impossible with each passing day. As they walked, he would look at Sarai, the woman he loved, and wonder how God's promise could possibly come true. This tension between the divine promise and their human reality is a central theme of their story. It is about holding on to the promise even when everything in your experience tells you it is impossible. Altars in a new land. After a long and tiring journey, they finally arrived. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. It was here, in the heart of this new and unfamiliar territory, that God appeared to Abram again. He reaffirmed his promise with simple, powerful words: "To your offspring I will give this land." In response to this divine appearance, Abram did something significant. He built an altar to the Lord. By building one in Shechem, Abram was staking a spiritual claim. From Shechem, Abram continued his journey south, moving his camp to the hills between Bethel and Ai. And there, he again built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. This became a pattern in his life. Wherever he went, he established a place of worship, turning the landscape of his physical journey into a map of his journey of faith, a faith that was being built stone by stone in a new and promised land. A vision in the darkness. Years have passed since Abram arrived in Canaan. Yet, the central promise of a great nation remains unfulfilled. Abram is old, and his wife, Sarai, is still barren. One night, the word of the Lord comes to Abram in a vision. Abram's response is not one of silent, pious acceptance. It is a cry from the heart.
"Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? His heir is not a son of his own blood, but a servant from his household.
He leads Abram outside and into the vastness of the night. Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then comes the promise. So shall your offspring be. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness.
The weight of the promise. Abram asks for another sign. God's response is a command to prepare for a solemn and ancient ceremony. He cuts the larger animals in two and arranges the halves opposite each other, creating a path between the pieces. Birds of prey swoop down on the carcasses, and Abram has to drive them away. Abram must actively guard the promise against the doubts and fears that threaten to tear it apart. As the sun begins to set, a deep and terrifying darkness falls upon Abram. The Bible describes it as a thick and dreadful darkness, a covenant sealed in blood. A smoking firepot and a blazing torch passed between the pieces. It is God, and God alone, who passes through the path of death. In this incredible act, God takes the entirety of the oath upon himself. The promise does not depend on Abram's faithfulness. It rests solely on the unchanging, unbreakable character of God himself. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, formally establishing the promise. He defines the borders of the land his descendants will inherit, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. The covenant is sealed, not by human effort, but by divine fire. A new name, a new identity. 13 more years pass. In the intervening years, driven by doubt, Sarai had given her Egyptian maidservant, Hagar, to Abram to bear a child. This resulted in the birth of Ishmael. The long silence from God is broken when he appears to Abram once again. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. God also changes Sarai's name. As for Sarai your wife, her name will be Sarah. God declares that Sarah herself will bear a son. When Abraham hears this, he falls face down and laughs to himself. Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? But God is firm. The promised child will be named Isaac, which means he laughs, a permanent reminder of his parents' astonished reaction. After giving new names and the promise of a son through Sarah, God establishes a physical sign to mark the covenant. This is my covenant. Every male among you shall be circumcised. This command was to be a visible, physical symbol of the relationship between God and the people of his promise. The act of circumcision was to be performed on every male child on the 8th day after his birth. It was a direct link to the promise of descendants. On that very day, Abraham took his son Ishmael and every male in his household and circumcised them, as God told him. At 99 years old, Abraham undergoes the painful rite himself. His immediate action is a powerful testament to his faith. The story now shifts to a scene of hospitality under the heat of the midday sun. 3 mysterious visitors appear near Abraham's tent. Abraham rushes out to greet them. He and Sarah prepare a lavish feast. They serve the men themselves.
"Where is your wife Sarah? I will return about this time next year. Sarah will have a son." "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" "No, I did not laugh." "Yes, you did laugh."
As the heavenly visitors prepare to leave, their mission takes a darker turn.
Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people? 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10.
"For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it."
This showcases Abraham's own spiritual growth. He is now an intercessor. When the conversation ends, Abraham returns home, having done all he could to save the city. The long-awaited son. Just as God had promised, the impossible happened. Sarah, at 90 years old, conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his 100th year. The long, painful decades of waiting were finally over. They named him Isaac. He laughs. The laughter of cynicism became laughter of pure joy. Isaac, living evidence God keeps his promises. Laughter echoed through the camp, a promise fulfilled. Abraham held a great feast on the day Isaac was weaned. A painful farewell. The joy surrounding Isaac's birth soon casts a shadow over Abraham's other son, Ishmael. Sarah sees Ishmael mocking Isaac during the feast, celebrating his weaning. She sees a threat to Isaac's inheritance.
Get rid of that slave woman and her son.
God reaffirms Isaac's central role. Yet God shows compassion for Ishmael too. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also. With that reassurance, Abraham knows what he must do. Early the next morning, Abraham rises. He takes some food. He takes a skin of water. He gives them to Hagar. She sets the supplies on her shoulders and leaves with her son. The water in the skin is gone. She lifts her voice in uncontrollable grief and weeps. God heard the boy crying. The angel of God calls from above. God opens Hagar's eyes. She sees a well. God was with the boy as he grew up. He becomes an archer. His mother finds him a wife from Egypt. Ishmael becomes the father of a great people. Some time has passed. Isaac, the child of laughter and promise, has grown from a baby into a young man. But the journey of faith is not over, and the greatest test is yet to come. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. Early the next morning, Abraham begins his preparations. He gets up, saddles his donkey. He also calls Isaac. Then he begins to cut the wood for the burnt offering. They set out, a journey that would take 3 long days.
Stay here. We will worship and then we will come back to you.
Abraham then takes the wood for the burnt offering and places it on Isaac's shoulders. He himself carries the fire and the knife. And so the two of them, father and son, walk on together, the altar and the lamb.
Father, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?
God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son.
When they reach the place, he builds an altar, he arranges the wood, he binds his son Isaac, and lays him on the altar on top of the wood. He has surrendered everything. His love, his hope, his future. The father raises the knife, ready to obey the command of God to the very end.
Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son.
The test is over. Abraham looks up and sees a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. He takes the ram and sacrifices it as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham calls that place, "The Lord will provide." Because of his absolute faith, God reaffirms his covenant, promising again that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars, and that through his offspring, all nations will be blessed. A legacy of faith. After the intense trial on Mount Moriah, Abraham's life enters its final chapter. The rest of his days are marked not by dramatic tests, but by the quiet fulfillment of his role as a patriarch. A significant event is the death of his beloved wife, Sarah. To bury her, he must buy land. He purchases the cave of Machpelah. For the first time, the man who was promised the entire land now officially owns a piece of it. Abraham's next major concern is securing a wife for his son, Isaac. He sends his most trusted servant on a long journey with a solemn oath, "Find a wife for Isaac from my own country and my own relatives." Finally, after a long and extraordinary life, Abraham's own journey comes to an end. The Bible says he died at a good old age, 175 years old, an old man and full of years. His 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael, come together to bury him. They lay him in the cave of Machpelah, beside his wife Sarah. The reunion of his 2 sons at his graveside is a poignant moment of reconciliation. Section 1. The Tapestry of a Faithful Life. Abraham's life was a remarkable journey woven from threads of divine promise and human experience. We witnessed his moments of profound trust. His journey was also marked by deep human struggles, a walk that echoes through time. The legacy of Abraham extends far beyond his own lifetime. It teaches us that trust in God is not a passive belief, but an active journey. It involves listening for God's call in our own lives and moving toward the future He has promised. Through every stage of Abraham's journey, God was always present. He was the God who made promises, who heard the cries of the abandoned, and who provided a ram at the very last moment. The question God posed to Sarah, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" resonates through the ages. It invites us to look beyond our own impossibilities and to trust in a God for whom all things are possible. Ultimately, Abraham's story is an invitation. It invites us to embark on our own journey of trust, to build our own altars of remembrance, and to believe in promises that seem too good to be true. Abraham's epic journey is a testament to a simple yet profound truth. The most meaningful life is one that is simply spent walking with God, one faithful step at a time. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like for more.